So when you're graphing linear equations, um, there's many different forms of the line that you can try to graph. The easiest one, or the one you might remember pretty well, is the slope-intercept form. That's the form y equals mx plus b. Okay, so the m in this equation represents the slope, and as you recall, the slope is rise over run in a graph, right? And then the second part of this type of equation is this b. B represents the y-intercept. That's where x equals 0. Where does that line intercept or pierce the y-axis? Okay, so we call that the y-intercept. And that's where x equals 0. All right, so let's go ahead. I'm gonna show you a equation that we're going to graph. Y equals -2/3 x plus 5. Okay, so right away we know that our slope is going to be -2/3. How do we know that? Because that's the coefficient or the number that's multiplied next to that x variable. Okay, so m is going to be, well, let's just point an arrow there. Okay, m is going to be -2/3. And b, y-intercept is going to be 5. Specifically, it's going to be the 0.05. So here's a few things that we can talk about this equation with. All right. First of all, we're going to talk about it in words. With any function, we're talking about linear functions today, but with any function, you can talk about them in terms of words. You can use words to describe the function. So I know that this function has a slope that's negative. So it has a negative rate of change, and it also pierces the y-axis at that 0.05. Okay, so I can use my words. I can also use algebra, and that's what we were given. We were given the algebraic expression or algebraic equation. That's what this is right here. This is the algebra. Okay. Another thing we can do is we can draw a table, right? The table will tell us a lot of information about that linear equation and get us to our final thing that we want to find, which is graphing that linear equation. So I'm going to go ahead. Our final task is to graph this linear equation. So I'm going to draw the xy plane. This is the x values that go left to right, and the y values go up and down. And we'll just draw a few tick marks here to tell us where we're going to go, and we'll get started. All right, so the first thing you do when you graph a line is you want to find a point to graph, and we already know a point. In fact, if we use our table, we can use this kind of as a guide. Since we have a y-intercept, we know that x is 0 and y is going to be 5. How do we know that? Because it's right here. So our y-intercept is 5. Okay. So we're going to graph that. We're going to start at the origin, which is at 0, 0. We're going to go up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's a point on our line. That's a point on our line, our our linear equation. Now we're going to take the slope. Okay, let's break it down. The slope is -2/3. That's equal to rise over run. Okay, the rise is -2. That means we go down 2 because it's negative. That's why we go down. So we're going to go down 2, 1, 2 from this point, 1, 2, and we're going to go over 3. We're going to go in a positive direction, 1, 2, 3. So we're at the point right here. So now we've got 2 points, and with 2 points, you can draw a line. You can do your best guess. Okay. Now we know there's no other points around here that, we can make some points, put some points in the table and draw a few more points. But for now, all I want to do, the last point I want to find is the x-intercept. And the x-intercept is where y is 0. and we have to find out what x is. So that's kind of interesting. Let's figure that out. How do we figure that out? How do we figure out what the x-intercept is? Well, we know that it's going to start moving down here. It's going to hit here, but we have to know exactly where. We need some precision. The way we're going to do that is we're going to rewrite our equation. Y equals negative 2/3 x plus 5. And instead of the y value, we're going to plug in this 0. Okay, we are actually going to plug that in for y. All right. So let's rewrite it as 0 equals negative 2/3 x plus 5. Okay, very first thing we probably need to do to solve this algebraic expression, subtract 5 from both sides. What we do on one side, we're going to do to the other side. And we're going to end up with negative 5 equals negative 2/3 x. Okay, these plus 5 and minus 5 cancel out. Now we just have to figure out how to solve for x. If we can solve for x, we know where we're going to mark up this x-axis, but we have to solve it. We can't just guess. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, I've got a fraction here, negative 2/3. I need to find and multiply the reciprocal of negative 2/3. Okay, that's a really important word, reciprocal. What it is it's basically taking this fraction and flipping it over. Because if I multiply a fraction by its reciprocal, I'm going to get 1. They're going to cancel out. And so I'll just have x on the right-hand side. So I'm going to multiply by negative 3/2. I like to use parentheses to keep my fractions clear. What I do on one side, I have to do on the other. So I'm going to multiply that by negative 3/2 as well. And now I have to multiply out. Algebra 2 is a little bit tougher. We got several steps to get us through. Negative 2/3 times negative 3/2 is just 1. So that's like 1 times x. And negative 3 halves times negative 15, the negative 3 and the negative 5 cancel when I multiply them. So I'm left with 15, and I divide by 2. Okay. So we can write this as 15/2 equals x, or 7.5 equals x. So that's 7.5 right there in our table. And now we get to plot this point. This is the point. We're going to plot this right here all the way over down here. And that's 7.5 is our x and 0 is our y. So it's got to be along this x-axis. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So our point is right here. That means my line's not exactly accurate. Maybe I can, if you're using, if you're using pencil, this isn't too bad. But since I'm using pen, I've got to use this correction tape. So the line is going to go through that point right there. Okay, not a perfect line. Probably use a ruler to help me out, but that is how you graph a linear equation. Okay, so all these steps, we just graphed this linear equation right here. Right? We use some words to describe the linear equation. We already had an algebraic expression or equation. We used a table, and finally we got to the graph. So hope you enjoyed it. Hope it wasn't too tough. It's just review. And hopefully you have enough information to go and work a few of these problems yourself. All right, great. Talk to you soon.